We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickel, and I've got Austra here. Yay! Austra's in the house.
We're back again.
We're back, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation today. And I know Austra's kind of jacked up right now, and I totally get it. It's exciting. So the subject today is we're going to talk about insecurities and our insecurities, what that looks like. And so I just wanted to quickly start with what insecurity looks like, and then what the opposite or the absence of insecurity looks like. So this is an insecure person looks like. An out of balance, insecure person may exhibit behaviors such as overcompensation, avoidance, people-pleasing, seeking constant reassurance, negative self-talk, jealousy, defensiveness, perfectionism, overthinking, low self-esteem, relationship difficulties, and risk avoidance. These behaviors are often driven by underlying fears, doubts, and a need for external validation. I thought that was a really complete definition of what it feels like to be an insecure person. I can identify with probably every single one of those. One of those. So the opposite, or the absence of, because we were talking about that was really interesting, what the opposite could be or what the absence is. And in this case, because sometimes those are two different, I guess, perceptions or two different viewpoints. In this case, they came up the same. And it says the absence of insecurity is characterized by confidence, self-assurance, authenticity, resilience, healthy relationships, emotional intelligence, positive self-perception, goal orientation, and a sense of peace and contentment. These traits manifest in their body language, communication, decision-making, and interactions, creating a balanced and fulfilling life.
The opposite sounds lovely.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your experience with insecurities?
Well, in my case, I had a lot of insecurities. All of them actually that they talk about in here, I had every single one of them, and it was even when I had a measure of healing, because like I said, most of my healings happened over the last 10, 15 years, a great measure of it. But over the years, there had been some. But a lot of this, the insecure thing, was one of the most difficult. And I'll tell you, and I've shared this story before, and I'll share it again. And this is one that I never shared with anybody ever because I had so much shame behind it. But at one of the jobs I was working at, I was working with the HR department, which was, I didn't know at the time, not a great idea. But they had me take this test because they wanted to kind of see where I was at, because I was thinking of, maybe move in positions within the company. And so I took the test, and I remember answering it. Some of it I answered what I thought that they would want me to answer, right? I did that. But I did actually answer some of the questions truthfully. And this is what the HR representative said to me. You are the most insecure person I've ever met in my life. Imagine, just let that sit a minute. You are the most insecure person I've ever met. Yeah, it hit really hard. And I was shocked.
What about it was the shocking piece?
I knew I had insecurities, but this is one of the HR representatives of a company that had over 10,000 employees. So this is a lot of people. He interacted with a lot of people, right? And to hear that, And he looked me dead in the eyes, and I just, it was like I felt like, oh, I'm having a real reality check. Now, whether that was honestly true or not, I don't know. I don't know if there, I don't know if there was a motive behind it. I don't know. I just know it clearly still sticks with me today. Today it doesn't hit me at all like it did then. But I realized I needed to hear that.
Mm. Can you talk a bit on
Whether it
that?
was 100% true, 90% true, or 20% true, I needed to hear it because it got my attention.
Can you expand on that? Like, what did you have to hear? Because I feel like it's not something that might feel natural, especially when you're in that space, to be like, oh, I
Yeah,
definitely needed to hear that, especially with hearing something like that, which can be really triggering,
it
especially
was
if you
hugely
are
triggering.
insecure as well.
Right. And I was really insecure.
If you weren't, it wouldn't affect you, but like you were.
I know deep inside there was a little voice, and I do believe it was God telling me you need to hear this. But did it hurt? Did it spin me out? Did it turn me upside down? Oh yeah. Did it make me dive into even, just a deeper insecurity? It did. But it woke me up, and this is why I say it was good for me, is that it made me start paying attention to me, to my behaviors. It was kind of really, I think, the beginning of having some real self-awareness and paying attention
Mm.
to the self-awareness, because there's a reason why it was being said. And I
Yeah.
knew, what I knew inside of me is there was truth to it. I just didn't know how much, but I knew there was truth. And I felt like when I heard that there was definitely more truth than what I thought there was. That I thought I was more secure than what I really was. And when I look back on it, I clearly was not as secure as I thought I was. So the reason why I say at the time it hurt really bad, it absolutely triggered me for a long time, but it caught my attention, and it made me think, and instead of going to the, for a long time, of course, I did the beat myself up, I was hard on myself, I was self-judgmental and all that. I did that for a while. But then I finally thought, okay, what can I do about this? Like, let me start paying attention to how people respond to me. Let me pay attention to how I respond to others. I started
What
paying
would trigger
attention.
you to even like think that? Because that in itself, even though it might seem like small thought, but it's significant.
Well, I don't know what exactly caused me to do that. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to think beforehand if maybe I had already had some of those thoughts in my mind, and I may have like paid attention to how people react to me and how I react to others. That had already kind of started, and I think this
Mm-hmm.
just made me go deeper because I think I was curious. I'm going to use your phrases, and I really think I was curious.
Hmm.
Um, but I was always looking for the negative though. When I was curious, I was looking for the confirmation of that
Ah.
belief system.
So it's curious on like what was wrong with me.
Right,
What kind of
right.
like what else can
Is what
reaffirm
there's
this?
Yeah, is what they're saying true? Is what they're saying is true? Let me find the evidence to see if it was true. And I wasn't finding evidence that it was 100% true. I was finding some evidence that, whoa, even today it shocks me. And I shared this with you a few months ago, that I was watching one of my reels that you created for me, and it was a really good reel. I mean, there's several of them that are really good, and it makes me cry because first of all, it's going to help somebody, but it shocks me how I come across
Mm.
still to this day. It still shocks me. See, there's insecurities there, and I think it's okay. It's okay. It's keeping me humble. I'm not beating myself up. Um, but it shocks me still how confident I come across, because I don't feel as confident as I come across 100% of the time.
Relatable.
Yeah, right.
For me, it's weird when people tell me about my confidence or how confident I seem, or and I'm like, really?
You don't know what's going on up here sometimes.
Yeah, and one is up here, but the rest of the body also, the emotions and even like some past like trauma or stuff like that, reflecting back on Tim Fletcher's episode, small T, big T. So
Yeah.
it's not always
Mm-hmm.
the big T trauma. So it's
Right.
something that even like with that, it's really interesting how I think for me it was exactly the same with my podcast, because people will tell me like, "Oh, you're so good at like explaining stuff," or "You
Hmm.
seem like so confident," and I'm like, I don't know about that." Um, but then when I watched some of the clips, I would literally catch myself leaning in with interest, listening what I'm saying,
Right, right. Exactly, exactly.
and it was really interesting experience, because I think that not often we get a chance to see ourselves from side, when most of the time, speaking on like that layer of insecurity, as we are in that moment, let's say as we're recording right now, when I was more in my insecure phase, I would now think about all the stuff that you might be judging of me, or what I'm saying, or
Hmm.
the way I'm looking. And then on top of that, what everybody listening gonna think about me if I say this or if I say that, and how they're gonna see me, or like there's no way I'm gonna talk on this, because then this gonna happen, or they're gonna tell me this or think this. So like even with that, it's something that there would be so many layers of, and this is something that I was thinking on, like what's at the root of the insecurity, and what came to me was shame.
Oh yeah,
There
yeah.
was so much shame, and
Hmm.
it was really interesting to, I don't even know if it was like, probably it was some level of healing that I have done unintentionally, because I didn't really believe in that like healing for quite a while, and or it felt like kind of too woo woo to me.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was playing basketball, I was so insecure about the way I was looking. I would always feel like I'm fat, ugly, and clumsy. Those are
Mm.
my belief systems about me. Which, by the way, looking back, none of it was true. Slow. I actually on court I wasn't that slow, because I was able to read situation well. So I was ahead because I was reading situations well. Even
Ah,
if I was on paper, I might have been slower than others, but I was able to read the game quite well. So that was
ah.
compensating for my slowness. But even with that, I was like, "Oh, I'm so slow. I'm not good enough for all this kind of stuff." Um, Even though I was the only player at times playing all game with no breaks, and I didn't get tired. That's how much I had trained myself, waking up at like
Wow.
5 a.m., doing my own workouts before school. But I didn't see any of it. I didn't see all the points that I made. I didn't see how good I was. The only thing that I saw was like, I'm fat, ugly, clumsy. And what were the layers that I looked at the world at through? Those were
Hmm.
the layers. And
Hmm.
even if I remember there was and I was so convinced, especially the fat piece. I was so convinced about it that I was fat, and I was training a lot. Like I was training probably like at least twice as much as my teammates, because I was doing my own workouts. And some summer, I remember there was one summer where I think I didn't go to any summer camps, and I would train at our property probably good 6 to 8 hours a day every day the whole summer. Um, and that's when I got back. And mind you, when I got back, all the workouts seemed so easy, and I'm like, why is it so easy? I didn't put together
You
that
were
all
in
those
really good
hours.
shape.
Yeah, like all those hours they added up. And I
Aw.
remember even like one of my teammates, I think she said me
Wow.
something along the lines of like, you got like in such a good shape, you literally have like six pack. And I was like, no, I don't. I didn't see any of it. Even if I don't know if I had it or didn't, but like even when I look back, I I look at the pictures of me and I'm like, I'm literally skinny. Like,
You and I were looking at pictures, and you were, yes, you were not
and
fat at
and I
all.
was convinced I was so fat, I was so slow. And now, if even like to give listeners perspective on how those insecurities, which insecurity is probably a big part of it also, is like belief system that we have about ourselves. Even
Right,
like those
right.
things that I thought about me, those were like beliefs that I had. What happened is that I now started to live my life as if I was that. So all the decisions that I would make,
Right,
I would be like,
right.
well, there's no point for me to do this or to go there or whatever, because
Hmm.
I'm like this. And what happens is that through those perspectives, or like those like perceptual filters that I would have, I literally create a world around me that reinforces me that belief. Speaking on like the power of our mind, it's not always in our
Right,
benefit,
right,
but like
right,
it is
right,
powerful. And
right.
even now, as I was thinking about it even today on my way back, about there's no way that, let's say, 10 years ago, I would look at my current half Ironman prep and see where my body is at, that I would even consider, well, I wouldn't even consider doing half Ironman. There's no way I would do that. Or that I would think or be aware of how much my body would be capable of doing.
Mm.
Or even better, I feel no, let me think. Yeah, I don't think I feel any shame around my body,
Mm.
which
Nice.
is weird.
Well, and I'm going to use Tim's definition, Tim Fletcher's definition about shame. When I asked him, what shame is, and it makes sense that shame is a set of beliefs that we have. It's a set of beliefs that we have that create the emotions and the feelings.
Yeah, and
And
through that
you
also
have
some
worked
actions.
on your belief system around yourself. And so the shame goes away. So therefore, you don't think about that anymore. It makes sense. And when he said that, it hit really well with me because I started thinking that makes complete sense because I literally lived my life in deep shame, deep shame. And it was, it
Same.
was, and this is what a lot of people do that are abused before they start healing is they hold all this inside and they don't share it. And so it's when you're holding it inside and you don't share it, this thing can grow inside of you. And as I walk through my healing, and I did start talking about this because shame loses its power when it's spoken out a lot of times. Um, I don't have shame doesn't come up hardly at all, and when it does, it catches my attention, and I look at it, go, okay, why am I feeling shame? Why am I feeling shame? It's the same thing with jealousy. If that, that rarely pops up, and when it does, I know it has nothing to do with my external circumstances. It has to do with something going on inside of me, and it makes me reflect and go, okay, why am I feeling jealousy? That's so bizarre. And so I think with shame is when you change your belief system, which is so important in healing and growing,
Yeah.
you change it, the shame goes away. And the insecurities, like I of course have insecurities still. And we talked about this before we started recording, and I believe that we always will to a certain degree. I think for one, for me, it keeps me humble. And for two, we're human beings. We're not going to reach perfection, but we can learn to manage the insecurities, right? And
Yep.
we won't have as many insecurities because there's insecurities that we can work through for sure. But we learn how to manage them rather than them managing us.
And with this, I actually have a question because I got some conversations with few of the people in my life and some of the people that are following me, asking them like question whether they have any like questions on insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was pretty much like, is it possible to fully get rid of them? And I will quickly fill you in the conversation that I had with this person. And it was really interesting, mainly because even like through having these conversations, it made me think and it made me reflect. Because even like with where I
Mm-hmm.
am right now when it comes to insecurities, I would never ever imagine being where I am right now. Um, where there probably are some insecurities left, but the level of shame is way down.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the biggest one was like body
Mm-hmm.
image, or like the way I would see myself or like my body. It was like terrible. And I was never present. So like with that, like the conversations we had, it was along the lines of like, can you fully get rid of them? Because, and I will be curious to hear your answer first, because like on some days you might feel like, oh, everything is like perfect, I feel amazing, I have this like confidence and all the things that you read that are like the opposite of insecurities. But then there are days when you have those dips, when you now start to feel
Mm-hmm.
insecure and you start to feel down. And question would be like, you kind of already answered it, but you might answer again about like, is it possible to get fully rid of them? And if not, then, or as we work towards getting rid of them, what would be good ways to handle those ups and downs that are happening a lot on like healing and growing journey. I haven't had, I haven't experienced yet the straight line off with no
No,
downs.
no, no. Well, the one thing that came to my mind is, when we're working on our healing or growing journey, yeah, you're right. It is up and down. And I did a post that shows that, like, even in a day, it can go up and it's like that in the beginning for sure.
Even an
Um,
hour.
oh yeah, and part of what I look at too is, where are you in that moment? Are you really tired? Do you not feel good? Because sometimes when you're feeling really tired or you don't feel good, you're you're just not yourself. And so a lot of times that's the time when this stuff can kind of bubble up. But yeah, I did already kind of answer the question about whether you can actually get rid of them completely. No, I don't believe you can. I think you can learn to manage them and that they don't manage you. And I think that, uh, I think what you can use it as is a signal, just like jealousy, just like shame. Why am I feeling that? Because those feelings should not be your everyday normal feelings, right?
Hmm.
So you can get to a point where, they're not in your life anymore, and all of a sudden it pops up, and you're like, where did that come from? What happened? Wait, why am I feeling like that? And that's something going on within you. It is usually some form of belief. Something came up that caused you to believe something that's different than what your baseline is, right?
Hmm.
And so that's what I do in my life now, is when I'm feeling those shame or insecurity, or even if I feel jealousy, because it doesn't pop up in my life every day, it gets my attention. So that kind of answers that question, I think, or a couple of questions there.
What I can add on this is, and we had really interesting discussion about this uh, with that person about how those days when you are down or you feel insecure, those are the days that you actually can gain the most, because those are the days when you can
Yeah.
practice dealing with those insecurities
Mm-hmm.
or overcoming or trying to understand them. And I know that for me, like, there's those are the days when I have learned the most about myself, as long as I don't jump into that beating myself up or
Mm-hmm.
pretty much like that judgment versus curiosity. uh
Right.
Instead of being like, oh my gosh, why am I feeling like this again? I thought this was over. I thought I kind of
Yeah.
dealt with it and I should be done by now. Which is
Yeah.
understandable response, knowing that like it doesn't feel good. Like it doesn't feel good to be down and kind of be back in that place, especially
Yeah.
if you have had experienced how it is to be out of it.
Right. Right. Because it feels really, it really stands out. It really stands out. Just like anger for me stands out now. And I try to get it, I don't try to avoid it, but I try to work through it much quicker because I don't like how that feels. And it takes a while to get you back down to calm.
And meanwhile, I'm still learning to be angry.
I'll show you. I'll show you how to do it.
Need to take
I'm an
some
old
like
pro.
master class from
I
you.
know, right? Here's how to be angry.
Yeah, and it's and like with that also, I think what one thing that we kind of touched on with this person in that conversation about was that when you feel insecure, in some ways you can feel like you have lost your power, or like you're
Oh
kind of
yeah.
like, like
Yeah.
in some ways even like powerless, or that insecurity has
Helpless.
power over you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's again
Mm-hmm.
not, doesn't feel good to be there.
No.
And but at the same time, what I can say from my experience, which probably isn't an advertised answer, but it works, is that what has been helping me is in some ways, well, I call it exposure therapy. It might not be exactly that, but that's kind of what I have done with some of the things where when I identify something where, let's say with insecurities, usually insecurity and shame go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually something that I can recommend people to do, because that's something that I did literally just this weekend, as I was thinking on like, what do I want to focus on or like work on during these next 75 days. I finished 75 hard yesterday.
Yes.
Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Um, so I was thinking like, what is it that I would want to work on? And I was, but I wanted to make it something that I feel like there's still some limits that I'm setting on myself, or there's still some kind of shame or something. And usually with shame, there's some insecurities. And I literally
Hmm.
wrote down, and I highly recommend everybody doing this. Just write down like, what is it that I feel shame about, or what is it that I feel um like I'm not fully confident in, or I don't feel like good about doing this, or like going to this activity, or whatever it might be. And just write down everything that comes up. Like, what is it where like when I do this, I feel ashamed, or where this happens, I feel ashamed, or I think for me, yeah, for me, the main thing was shame. And as I write down, um, that's when I start to see things that I could work on. I don't look at it as, oh, here's the list of me to like beat myself up. Yeah. Another
Yes.
like 50 things. And usually these lists come easier than what am I good at? And
Yeah, so
and
true.
like with that, at the same time, like what I look at is, and it's something that I was listening about today that makes a lot of sense, is am I actually competent at this thing? Emotions aside, how I feel about it aside, am I actually good at it? A lot of times in my case, the answer might be no. And I'm like, okay, if I'm not good at it, is there something that I can do to get slightly better at this? Because one thing, and this is interesting, I had a conversation with my grandma about it. I think I told you about it,
Hmm.
where we asked her
Yeah, this is
pretty much
interesting.
like, at what point does the insecurities end, or at what point you just don't care, which also might be another topic we could touch on, where at what point do you get to the place where you just don't care what other people think, and anything like that, you're just like living your life, you pretty much like you don't give a shit, you're doing your thing. And she had really interesting answer that I don't think I would expect, but it makes a lot of sense. So what she said was that she didn't have time to be insecure. So what she did was like she was in pretty much like national team in like volleyball. So she was focused on that when she was like younger. So she was doing like a lot of training and stuff like that. And
That's where you get it from.
but at the same time, like in there, she said like, oh, they're like some of my teammates, they would get like a lot of boys and stuff like that. And she was like, I didn't have that many, but I still had like some boys that would like give me some attention, stuff like that. So like I was okay with that. I didn't feel like I needed a lot of boys to give me attention. Um, and then from there, she got two sons, and she had to focus on family, taking care of family, taking care of like the property, stuff like that. And she said that she just didn't have time to be insecure. And and there's like
Hmm.
several kind of layers to this. One of them was that she said that because she was working or like doing something, it wasn't working. She said like because I was doing stuff, I didn't have time to like worry about stuff. Which she said like now that she's retired, there's a lot of time to think,
Yeah.
which is interesting experience for her. But then also another layer to this is knowing that we live in social media time right now, where
Yeah.
what you see online is everybody's perfect kind of image that they want to show of themselves. We
Hmm.
often forget that there's a lot of things that are unsaid or unshown. Um,
Yeah.
not shown. And with that, we often forget that the person that seemingly has it all, they don't show you the full picture. They maybe show
Right.
you like one piece of it,
A sliver.
and they might not show something that they're going through, or the real cost of where they're at, or whatever.
Hmm.
And with that, it's really easy to jump to conclusions because we see how not perfect our lives are, and how we're not in a place where we would want to be. um, which like I feel like this could be a good transition into the question about, let me see, another person asked me a good question. And this is I feel like it's kind of tricky to answer from, if I now put myself in a place that I was at, um, when I was like really insecure, how to convince yourself that everything is okay with you, kind of that like you're not better or worse than others. And pretty much the idea is how to believe in myself, especially when we live in the world where all you see around you is perfection,
Hmm.
and perfection is kind of the standard. in some ways.
So the question is, how do I not be insecure? Is that
How to convince yourself that everything with you is okay. You're not
okay?
better or you're not worse than the person next to you. In some ways, the question also can be how to stop comparing myself to others.
Yeah, yeah, that's, you know, I know in the comparison thing, like what you're talking about, social media,
It's in your
that's,
face.
it's in your face. And the first thing that comes to my mind is you really got to be careful about what you watch, what you listen to, what you read. You really got to be careful about what you take in and how much you take in. Because what you were just saying about what happens on social media, they're putting together, we're all putting together something really perfect, right? I mean, that's what we want to do. Um, and even in my case, if when I do videos and stuff, I retake them because I want them to look good. I want to get the message across. So I don't show all my bloopers, right? But I think that that's the first thing is we've really got to be careful about what we're taking in externally in every way. Um, you know, it's almost like when you're in that place, you're so focused on what's external and you're not even looking at what's going on inside of you, why you're feeling that way,
Mm.
right? Because you're so busy sitting there going, oh, well, look how good she looks. And, all this stuff that's, you're comparing yourself with, you're focusing on the negative and you're not even stopping going, wait a minute. Why am I feeling like this? Because what those messages would do to me would just make me finally look at myself and confirm all that negative crap I was hearing and believing in my head. And so that's the stuff that I started looking for was, oh yep, there it is, look in the mirror, yep, look, skin, yep, whatever, hair isn't perfect. So yeah, that's what it did for me.
I have an interesting thought from what you were talking about, especially with like the comparison. When is the last time that, let's say, anybody listening who you might identify that you're comparing yourself with somebody else? When is the last time that you actually stopped and you thought about, is this what I actually want? So,
I know
what
that,
we
yeah,
see in others is something that we don't have that
right.
supposedly not even we would want to have, we should have based on
Yeah.
like the reality or like the external world around us. But have you actually stopped for a bit, look at that, let's say what that person has in this or whatever, think on, is it something that I actually want?
Yes, I do that. Especially, I mean, I'll use a podcast as an example, right? Of course, I want this to go big and viral, not more importantly, because I want to help people. And so I look at some of the people Mel Robbins, right? So I look at her and what she's got, and I don't, how I look at it now, how the insecure Lisa would have looked at it is like, oh my gosh, look at her, da, 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 and come up with all these excuses of why I can't be like her, and then it crosses over into jealousy, and instead she inspires me. I'm inspired by her. I watch what she's doing. I'm learning from her. I don't want to be her. I
Yeah, yeah.
use her as an example because I do admire her. I do admire her work, and we're in the same field of self development, but what we both do is really kind of different. But I admire, how she connects with her audience. I admire her authenticity. I admire the people that she brings on and brings out so much stuff that helps people. And so I learn from her. That's the difference. The old Lisa would have sat here and I would have looked at, oh, I'm not doing it like that. I'm not doing my podcast like that. I'm not
Even
doing
like the
that.
reason, what's the point of doing it then?
Right. I'm doing it all wrong because I'm not doing it like her. I mean, that is how far insecurity will take you. And the truth in this today is I'm not doing this. I know I'm not perfect. I know I make mistakes. I know I'm not a Mel Robbins. I understand that. Um, that doesn't stop me anymore. That instead inspires me and how I can get better. And what the bottom line is, I want to get these messages out to help people. And yes, I want to get them out there so that they help people and I'm not rambling or doing stuff that, doesn't help people. But I use it as inspiration instead of condemnation on myself. You should have
Okay,
known
so
that.
this is good. And like with this, even to follow along with that thought of like, do I really want this?
No.
Even like with this example, she probably has been doing it for years, right?
Right. Right. She
And
has a background in it.
yeah, and she might be like, let's say 5 7 years ahead of you.
Oh yeah,
It might even be
easily.
more, you know.
Yeah.
And with that, what happens is what we do is we look at the other person and we're like, oh, they're so much better, or like, oh, I can't do it right because of this and that. But we
Right.
don't see where they started. We just look at where they are at, being years ahead of us.
Right. And
Or
compare where I'm at today to where they're at, and our backgrounds are completely different. I don't have the years that she has. So I shouldn't expect that of myself.
yeah,
That's a good point.
okay,
I'm glad you brought that
we will
up.
touch on we will need to touch on expectations as well, because that's a big one. Then
Yeah.
another one is, good example is skinny. um
Mm,
Look at the skinny person and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so much worse than her, and I wish I could be like her. It's like, okay, if that's what you truly want, which is actually understandable, a lot of times we want to look good, because it also makes us feel good. Not
hmm.
always. If we're obsessed with it, not always.
Right.
But
Right.
with that, then the question is like, okay, if that's what I want, am I, especially if you want to look like really like top models and stuff like that, am I willing to now count all the stuff that I eat,
Right.
have crazy like beauty regimes, and
Hmm.
literally have become in some ways obsessed with the way I
Right.
look, just so I can look at that standard? If the
Right.
authentic answer is yes, go for it. But it's not always the case. We just look at what we
Hmm.
don't have without looking at the price that that person might have paid
Right.
to be there.
Right. 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 Models, their life revolves. I mean, it's the same as athletes, right? Their life, when they're an active athlete, when they're a football player, when they're a baseball player or whatever, their life revolves around that, what they eat, their workout. They've got it. They what we don't see is all the stuff that they do behind the scenes to have that image. It's a lot of work, and they give up. There's things that they absolutely sacrifice in their life to have that, and they choose to do that. And we come
Yeah.
along and we're like, well, I want to look like that. But you have a great question. Are you willing to sacrifice to have that? And if you're willing to sacrifice all that, is there a reward in it? Are you doing it just because you want to have that, or
Yeah.
do you have a $30 million contract waiting for you, expecting you to do that? It's just like, I used to have friends that, oh, they wanted to be rock stars. They want that whole lifestyle. And I never got into that. I loved music, but I never got into that. And my thought was, I know that I didn't realize, of course, the depth of what they do in order to have that lifestyle. But I just knew that they were giving up a lot to have that lifestyle, to be a rock star. It's not just what happens up on stage. That's just the couple hours of fun. There's a whole lot more work and a whole lot more sacrifice that goes on behind that.
And with this, we might even touch a bit on those unrealistic expectations, because I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
it is affecting the insecurities, because we see, it's so weird how the world works. We see everybody online being so perfect, and deep down we all know behind the
Mm-hmm.
screens that none of us are perfect. And
Mm-mm.
and then we end up feeling like we're the only ones who are not perfect.
Yeah, it's a lonely
But
place.
yeah, and then if we're lucky, we get some people in our lives when we can have like heart to heart conversation where we can share stuff and they share back, and you're like, whoa, you also feel like that? You
Mm-hmm.
also think that? Or they might feel insecure in one area while you feel insecure in like another area, which is really interesting as well. But it's something that I feel, those unrealistic expectations that we have, that a lot of times it's coming from our environment. I know that for me, that was causing a lot of internal suffering, but also lack of momentum or movement in life. Because then I'm literally, to my grandma's point, I'm literally sitting doing nothing, just ruminating on that thought
Mm-hmm.
of, oh, I'm not good enough because of this, or there's like another thing that I like, even like, and it's so weird, even like with the body shame, because I feel like that was really big one for me. I was ironic now me speaking on podcast. um I was afraid of getting any attention or being seen.
Yeah. Yes.
I literally at class, I wouldn't raise a hand, like I wouldn't,
Mm-mm.
not even talking about raising hand, I wouldn't raise a hand to ask if I can go to toilet. That's how
Hmm.
much I didn't want to be seen, like at all. I was so insecure. Sometimes I think I didn't even wanted, I think it was, I think I had it. Yeah, like where I literally didn't want to go to the toilet because I was like, people are gonna see me there. Even as I stand in line, people are gonna see me. They're gonna look my, they're gonna see me in my body, see my
Oh.
body. And I was like, nobody can see that. I need to be kind of like sheltered where nobody can
Mm-hmm.
see me. Which now, kind of reflecting back, I think it was our last episode when I talked on massage courses.
Yes. Yes.
Which another point here with the exposure therapy. I didn't do it consciously at that time because I was still so much consumed by my shame and insecurities where I didn't really like think clearly or see myself clearly. Um, I was literally convinced that I'm ugly. Like, where's the logic in that? Like, people would give me compliments, I would give them like reasons why they're not true.
Yes.
Oh, you
Yeah.
look so good. Here's why I don't. And I
Yeah.
would give, or
Mm-hmm.
I would think like, oh, you're just saying it because you have to
Mm-hmm.
say it. It's a people say kind of thing. We are trying to be nice because that's how bad I look. Like
Wow.
that was the internal monologue. And
Yeah.
even like for some, especially like some people that know me that might be listening to this, that I usually don't talk this kind of stuff. They might be like, oh, like that's doesn't sound true, but it's like that's a good example of what's happening in our minds. That why do you think I got in self development? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was literally trying to fix myself, and big one was insecurities. And like with insecurities, it's, I think the best way how I can describe what I had, especially with, and it's, I'm really curious if that's the case, um, where, because I was thinking about it as you were talking a bit earlier, how insecurities might make us selfish. In like, and what I mean by that
Oh
is
yeah.
when I would be insecure about my body, which was literally, when is your body exposed? The whole day. Wherever you go, your body is exposed. So like
Yeah.
there's 100% of, oh my gosh, crossing like the crossroad, that
Oh.
was terrible. Because now everybody's stopping and they're staring at you
Oh,
as
they're
you
watching you as you walk
cross.
by.
And you're just like, oh my gosh, I so hope that not that I just don't trip, or like just don't look in the eye, just look down. And what happened, I literally can,
Oh.
I remember how I would feel like the whole, I, my vision, it wasn't like open anymore. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it becomes so wide. It's so
Yep.
like I would be so fooled, which, and
Yep.
mind you, that shame was there the whole day because my body would be exposed the whole day. Like um
Mm-hmm.
I would literally be in that, like it wasn't even laser focused. It was like just everything is blocked out and I'm
Yes.
fully going within, seeing everything that's wrong with me that everybody's seeing, even though they
Mm-hmm.
probably don't even notice any of this. Or they're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a nice looking girl. And I'm like,
Right.
they think I'm ugly. They see everything.
Yeah.
Which also was the reason why I was afraid to hug people. Because then they're gonna feel and see everything that's wrong with me because they'll be
Yep.
so close to me.
Yep.
Um, and they will catch me. Now
Mm-hmm.
I will
Now
be
they'll know.
exposed for sure. Now they're gonna
Yep.
know.
They'll know, and then
Um,
they'll tell everyone
and like
because they're
that shame was
seeing
like
you.
so paralyzing
Yeah.
that you can imagine how it can affect your decision making. Anything,
Yeah.
any
Exactly.
parties, anything like that. Nope, not going.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
busy. I have to do homework. Or
Yeah.
whatever would be my like excuse. I wouldn't go, and it wasn't because I, it's hard to say if I wanted to go or not authentically. But initially, the reason why I would say no was mainly from insecurities. It wasn't from
Mm-hmm.
a place of like, do I actually want to go or do I not want to go? It was more so like, if I go, people gonna see me. If they see me, they're
Yeah.
gonna judge me.
Mm-hmm.
So probably not go. And and with that, it's like you can become so limited in even exploring who you are, because those insecurities can take over so much of your life and so much of your like decision making, where
Yeah.
things that I might now be getting back to doing, like even like with basketball, I think basketball was the one where it was really mixed, because I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't attached to it where it was my identity. It was fun for me to do it. And I also, which is another thing that I wanted to bring up about competency, or I might have already brought up, I don't know. Um, because I did so much training outside of the basketball workouts, I got good. So I actually was competent at it. So there was a reason for
Mm-hmm.
me to feel good at it. So there was like, it was really interesting dance between insecurities and competence, because I was competent, but at the same time, I was still insecure. Because, like, as you
Mm-hmm.
play, if I have a ball, everybody's seeing that, everybody's watching that, especially if you do free throws,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's
All
looking
eyes are
at you.
on you. And
And,
and
and
so how
that's
did
where
you do with
actually,
that?
okay, so what helped me actually was getting really good. So out of insecurity, that's how I became good. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to I didn't want to experience that sense of shame or embarrassment with me playing like shitty. So that's why I started. I think I was 10 years old. I started to wake. Well, at 10, I might have woken up at 6. Then later on, I started to wake up at like 5 a.m. every day, and I would go outside the whole year, whether it was like raining, snowing, doesn't matter. I would go out there. I would do my own workouts that I was making, and a lot of it was coming
Uh-huh.
from insecurity. Which, by the way, important point here is that to some extent initially insecurity can serve you, because for me it served me to get to where I was playing like really well, even though it was like
Mm-hmm.
really emotionally like not pleasant place, but I got really good at it out of insecurity. I would literally, that's what was waking me up at 5 a.m. every day. Just go out there, just make sure I suck less today. and, and when the day comes when I have to play, or there's like same thing with the shooting, I would be always after workouts, I would stay longer and I would be shooting, because I was like, I need to get good so that when I'm playing, I'm not looking like an idiot. Like not and or I'm like judged or shouted at, which we also had like pretty vocal coach, shall I say.
Oh no.
Yep. And like with that was my, at that time, that was what was in some ways helping me to bring that confidence up, was putting in so much work that I
Yeah.
literally, like, on the day when I would have to play, I would play really well because of the
Mm-hmm.
repetitions that I put in. um
Mm-hmm.
where even like now when I'm playing every week with those girls, um I'm usually being chosen first. And it's really weird to kind of experience that, because I haven't played for like full court like 10 years easily. And it's it's interesting now to play from a place where there's no shame. I don't feel any shame when I'm playing. I'm actually just having fun. There's no like, oh, I now need to go and train. Actually, I do want to go and train extra, because I want to
Of
be
course you
like
do.
just, but it's not coming from a place of like, oh, like if I don't, then they're gonna think this of me or that of
Yeah.
me. I just don't like to feel like I can't breathe after like 20 minutes of playing. I want to play like really well, where they're like, how is she doing it? And I'm like, well, I'm training extra, so that's my secret. But it's and I feel that for me, actually, that experience served me really well, because I would never understand how, because in school, like for years until I went to the best high school in Latvia, I would be at the top of my class in marks.
Mhm.
Same thing like with uni. When I was in both in Latvia and in like UK, a lot of times people would come to me and I would like teach them, and they would put a lot of assumptions on me about like, oh, you're such a good player, or like you're so smart and all this kind of stuff. And I remember there was one, we had to do some like group work in uni, and there was one lady in my group who, or it was, I don't remember who it was, but like one of my course mates, they said me that, oh, I wish I could be like you. And I'm like, careful with that, because
Mm.
You don't see what's happening behind the scenes and how much work I actually put into this. Example, statistics exam that we had, I got really good mark. And usually people, it's the highest failure rate for that
Yeah.
subject because people don't go to study psychology for statistics. Like they
Right.
don't go,
Right.
but you need to study it. Um, and just for that exam, I probably studied at least 40 hours, at least easily. If not more, probably 2 weeks of like 9 to 5 kind of amount of like studying, plus good at least 4 to 5 times of going and asking questions to my lecturer, like one on one, like
Yeah.
really going deep into it. Um, where by the time I showed up to the exam, it felt easy
Yeah.
because I had done so much repetition.
Yeah.
Um, but that's something that I see a lot with like in myself, especially I can speak from experience with insecurities that, and in some ways, that insecurity in basketball gave me that valuable lesson early on is that a lot of times you can outwork your insecurities or your doubts because the more work I put
Hmm.
in, naturally I start to become better. And as I get better, I start to feel better about myself.
Right. Right. I mean,
And
really,
at the
that's, yeah.
opposite, yeah, if I sit and do nothing and I now feel bad about myself, which I have done, doesn't feel good. Nothing is moving forward, that reinforces me to feel worse about myself. And now I compare myself, and not only that, I follow back a bit more. Now I compare myself with others that the gap is even bigger. Now I feel even worse about myself, and
Right.
that's another cycle that I'm entering. So it's for me like to answer your question in really long way. Um, what's been helping me was definitely doing more, taking more action, because action in
Yes.
itself, it's weird to explain it or describe it, but something about doing, which is something that I was talking to my friend about, that I said you that I will try to summarize it in this conversation. It was really really interesting kind of conclusion that we got to. Like something about doing is really helping, even like to stop comparing myself to others, because I'm focused on doing instead of like, oh, you do
Right.
this and I don't do it because I'm sitting now not doing. I'm looking at
Right.
what you're doing. When I'm actually doing something and I'm doing something that I love or that I enjoy or find some enjoyment in,
Hmm.
I'm so focused on doing that thing that I now don't think about
Right.
what I'm insecure about, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Because the one thing about insecurities is it can be paralyzing, right? So it can make you sit, right, and just think and think. And when you've got someone like me who's an overthinker,
Me too.
you have any kind of analytical mind, you're going to be an overthinker and you have to watch that. And so then what are you doing? Inaction. You're doing nothing. You're just sitting there thinking,
Yeah.
and it just becomes a spiral effect of taking you down that rabbit hole. And you're right. And that's why. And when you finally take a step, even if it's just a little step, even if it starts with, hmm, I'm not going to believe that thought. I'm going to change that thought. Like even that simple is a step forward. And as soon as you say, I'm not going to believe that, I'm going to choose not to believe that thought. I'm going to choose to believe this, and it's more positive. That's already you're moving in the right direction, because insecurity will make you freeze. It will shut you down. It will make you go down a rabbit hole. And then taking action pulls you out of that for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that I probably 7 8 years ago wasn't happy or wouldn't be happy about hearing this. Um, but the only way how you can change anything is by taking action,
Right.
not by reading.
Right.
Reading is good. Reading is actually good initially to understand stuff, but don't stop there. Because
Right.
then what will happen, it actually can make it worse because now you read, you understand everything,
But
and
you're
now
not
you
doing
use
it.
all that understanding not to do something and
Yeah.
just stick to your story about yourself. I'm saying this because I have been doing it for years, not was doing, there's still some things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So like with that, it's so easy to get attached to that story because it's easier to sit and kind of like feel bad in that story instead of going to do something uncomfortable, which usually is kind of what change is. You do something that you usually don't, so naturally it doesn't feel as good.
Yeah.
But okay, I will
So
try to
so
summarize. Go
yeah,
ahead.
summarize this. Yeah.
Was there something you wanted to say?
No, after.
Okay. So I was asking my friend about kind of like what, if she has like any questions on like insecurities or anything like that. Um, and we got to talking about her experience with 75 hard, because like she said that while she was doing it herself, she felt like strong clarity and focus on where she's going as she was like doing it. And that focus in itself helped things to kind of align.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and this is the interesting conclusion that I wrote down, that I was like, huh, it doesn't make sense, but it does. So, and even like as you do 75 hard, you kind of naturally already don't fit in, because most people, they don't do like 2 workouts a day and like stick to the diet and drink
Right.
gallon of water and do it like every day. And you have to do it like, at the time she was also like working, so you have to do it, you have to squeeze everything in within like the day that you have. Um, so what I wrote down is that by not trying to fit in and focus on your stuff, you felt like you fit it in. You see where it doesn't make sense, but it also does make
Yeah.
sense.
Yes, it's true.
Like have you experienced that yourself?
Yes.
It's so weird.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um
Yeah. What you're
and
focusing on and what you're doing, you don't fit in, but yet you do.
because you have that clear focus on yourself,
Right.
something about it, and even like if I think now, I think that fitting in might be about self-acceptance, not as much about actually fitting in,
Yes.
or
Yes.
that relationship
Yeah.
with self.
Yes. Because if you don't have self acceptance, you're not going to fit in anywhere.
And further down, what, well, further down in my notes, um, what what she was explaining is that she felt more free with that, um, and with that, she took more actions. With more actions, she had new experiences, and
Yeah.
with new experiences, that helped her not to overthink. And then the other piece that I wrote down is when I felt good in myself, I actually wasn't focused on fitting in as much. So you actually
Yes.
don't focus on it. When you feel
Right.
good within yourself, you're not as worried about fitting
Right.
in.
Correct. Right. Right. And that's where we talk about, and we've talked about, and I actually am working on that. That very subject is really building a relationship with yourself, and that's something that, you know, people who have had childhood abuse or trauma, when I speak about my experience, it was like you were just in survival mode, right? You were just completely in survival mode.